All right, it is 4 o'clock. We'll call this meeting to order. Let's see, let's start with roll call. Anderson,
Here.
Bork, Gade, here, Grimm, Harrelson,
Here.
Krylov,
Here.
Murray,
Here.
Shetty,
Here.
Silman, Smith, Traer.
Here.
All righty, great. And then staff members present?
Sarah Gardner present.
Okay, great, thank you. Can I get approval of minutes from the meeting date of May 5th? Or are there any changes and corrections that might need to be made?
Harrelson, motion to approve.
Anderson, second.
Great, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. The next agenda item is announcements and reports, so action items from last meeting, which doesn't look like there are any from last meeting.
There's one. We didn't indent
great.
it correctly. Apologies, pre-vacation brain. And that action item was simply just to continue thinking about our prioritization items. We have 2 sections left to finish today, which we're hoping to get through. And then in terms of upcoming events, one of the initiatives of the Climate Office this summer is to provide cooling stations at Party in the Parks and neighborhood events. We've got 2 of them upcoming. If you'd like to see our staff in action at these events, we'll be handing out information about high heat impacts and awareness, as well as some cool things to help people cool off, like cooling bandanas and sunscreen sticks. So we've got one June 12th in Happy Hollow Park and one in June 26th in Scott County Park, or Scott Park, I should say, not County Park. Are there any events any of you would like to highlight?
This is Shetty. I'll just mention that the Office of Sustainability is holding its annual BioBlitz on July 12th this year. It's a Saturday. So I'm just telling you in advance to get it on your calendar if you're interested, but it's a great way for the community to come together and learn about the prairie.
All right. And then we broke out the next list of events in part to dovetail to our presenters who are here today. But as you are aware from our last meeting, the folks working on our comprehensive plan have scheduled a number of public visioning workshops for Iowa City. You can see those are being held. We've listed the dates, June 2nd through July 8th, and their locations. You, of course, get the presentation today, but we're hoping you'll help get the word out to community members and neighbors and folks in your network about opportunities for them to participate in the discussion as well.
All righty, great. Well, then that brings us to our new business, which is the comprehensive plan update.
All right. Chair and commission members, my name is Christopher Shires. I'm a principal with Confluence. Here tonight to give you a presentation on the comprehensive plan. Our firm, along with WSP, our partner engineering firm, have been hired by the city to update your long-range plan, the comprehensive plan of the city. And so I do have a presentation. We're a casual fun group, right? So if you guys have questions as I go through it, feel free to interrupt me and ask away. But I do have a couple of questions for you at the end of this presentation. If you have the time to spare, I'd love to get some immediate feedback from you. I also have sitting in the audience 2 of our planners, Emily Rizvik as well as Corinne Sidebottom, that'll be here for many, many events throughout the next month or so. In fact, if you see them sneak out, it's because they need to go set up for another one we have at Dream City at 5:30. And so every time we travel here, we try to take advantage of being in town to meet with as many folks as we can. So on the next slide, I just want to talk really briefly. In this presentation, I do want to give you a recap of the project scope and schedule, how we're updating the plan process. And then I want to jump into what is a comprehensive plan. It's something we use a lot, especially as a city planner, but you may be a little bit less familiar with it. And then I want to give you just a little bit from some of our analysis, more in particular our community profile. And then there are some emerging trends. I would love to get some feedback from you, especially in your role, your thoughts and ideas to help provide a little bit of light and guidance into some of the plan priorities going forward. And so on the next slide, and you can jump one more, We have broken this process out into just a simple five steps. It does take some time to get through a new plan update because it is such a wide and diverse document with a lot of different input. And so we have already completed phase one. It's where we do our initial analysis. And we are benefited by the direction of a steering committee made up of community stakeholders, some elected officials, as well as planning commissioners. What we're in the middle of right now is that public engagement. So before we've done anything, before we've come up with any great ideas or set some big directions for the plan, we need to hear from the community members, our various stakeholders, the community residents, other interested parties. And so I have a couple of slides at the end just to kind of remind and recap of what our next meetings are. And then in phase three, that's where we start that initial process. We've gotten all that input, we've done our analysis to come up with what are the big ideas? What are those big things we as a community want to think about going forward into the future? And then in phase four, we start drafting the plan. And then in phase five, we finalize that draft for its official adoption with our Planning Commission and City Council. All the way through that will be involving the public. We want to make sure that when we're still in draft form, they have an opportunity to tell us what they like, what we don't like, what maybe we missed, so that at the end of the day, we want everybody very comfortable with the plan, understand how it was developed, so that there's a lot more buy-in and participation. So not too unlike some of the planning efforts you've been through. So on the next slide, I want to show just that quick schedule. We don't do this quickly. We're much more than a year-long process. In fact, we're not wrapping up for another 11 months, all the way into next May. And all of this information is on our project website, and I can share that, that website location at the end of the presentation. So talk a little bit about comprehensive planning. 101, where a university is here, so that influences how I like to talk about things. So think of it's your comp plan class 101. On the next slide, really that big picture definition of what is a comprehensive plan. It's that long-range master plan for cities. We tend to look 20, 30, 40 years into the future to try to predict all those things that may occur, and what do we want to be as we continue to evolve and grow as a community. It is just a guiding document, it's not law, but it is a great tool for our elected officials, our commission members, to help guide decision making. And so it's really focused on all the different ways we live, how our business community functions, transportation, infrastructure, quality of life types of things. A lot of different components and elements within a comprehensive plan. We are looking into the future. In fact, I talked about looking 20, 30, 40 years in the future. But we also tend to think that comprehensive plans, because it is hard to predict the future, generally have about a 10-year shelf life. And you're really in that timeline right now where it was timely to update your current comprehensive plan. So we're looking into the future, but they have a shorter shelf life. And we're trying to guess the future a little bit to help focus our investments. So our precious capital improvement dollars, where do we build new roads? Where do we rehab roads? What are those other infrastructure desires and needs? We do want to encourage that strong and diverse tax base to make us healthier and more resilient. It's a great informational tool. There's a lot of information, a lot of analysis within any comprehensive plan, so it's available for folks' use and decision making. And a couple of big things, it definitely evolves over time. As we change our priorities as a community, as we change some of our principles, things that are important to us, that comprehensive plan does need to evolve. But it is a guiding and recommending document. It's not a law. It doesn't behold any specific action, but it's a great guiding document to help with some decision making. We like to push a lot of public engagement, and when done right, it can help reinforce our community identity. You know, what does it mean to be Iowa City? Just a little bit more. Comprehensive plan documents are really great in that there's a lot of graphics and a lot of maps of existing conditions, maps of analysis, but we also create something called a future land use map. And this decides or helps give, I should say, guidance, it's not a decided thing, guidance of where our areas the city should grow, or should preserve and not grow? What might infill or redevelopment look like? Where are those key areas? And also, we can have and in our plan, we will have a market analysis where we look at existing market conditions today, try to predict the future to help guide some decision makings. And then we really are looking at everything from impact of flooding, natural resources, existing infrastructure, transportation, mobility being the fancy word we use to say all these other ways we get around besides just a car, and other services provided by the city. And then very importantly, the big picture goals, what do we want to try to achieve, and then those action steps and policies to make those goals happen. So, talk a little bit about that future land use map. It is a graphical representation of the city and its planning boundary, however we might determine that. It's not necessarily an annexation plan. Sometimes it does need to be broad to try to deal with the what-ifs, because it depends on what a property owner might want to do. Do they want to be annexed in the city for city services and be developed? Do they want to be left alone, stay out as farmland, or something in between? So outside the city limits and inside the city limits are both very important. And so this is your current plan adopted in 2013, and all those colors mean something. So in general, yellow is like a low-density single-family residential, red is some type of retail commercial, and then the purples are some type of business park industrial, and then gray, because we have a lot of it, is some type of publicly owned land, maybe owned by the university, the school district, or the county. And this just paints one scenario, and this was the scenario decided back in 2013 of what Iowa City could look like going forward. There's more than one correct way to color up a future land use plan. It's based on what folks feel is the best decision today, and these plans can and do change, and they should. They should be reevaluated. And on the next slide, I do want to hit a little bit on the community profile, some of interesting facts as we've kind of run into them. And so on that first one, just talk about population change. Iowa City has seen healthy, steady population growth for a really long time. And so with that, we would anticipate that growth will continue. So if we look at just since 2000, almost 22% population increase. And so steady growth, really no wild fluctuations. Then on the next slide, we try to do some different methodologies to try to calculate what that population increase might be over time. This one's always a challenge because there's a lot of factors and external pressures that can always change that. We can be very low, we can be very high, or we can guess it just about right. So we do a lot of different methods and then try to create kind of an average or a median. In this case, thinking that if we're about 75,000 today, by the year 2050, so in about 25 years, we might increase about 20,000. So that's pretty significant. Maybe we get to 25, maybe we only get to 85 or something in between. But I think the one thing that we can be pretty assured of is that we'll continue to see population demand, and frankly, we sometimes consider that a growth pressure, all those pressures that occur with increasing our population. We do want to talk a little bit about age. So Iowa City, kind of like our region right through here, is a younger population when we compare ourselves to, say, the state of Iowa, more in line with Johnson County, Coralville, North Liberty, Cedar Rapids, all generally a much younger population with that middle cohort of those younger adults, children, and teens really making up a substantial portion. That is also one of those indicators to say the population is growing, is when you have that large younger population. When we talk about incomes, this may not come as a surprise to many, but it's really quite a diverse bag, and we think there's a lot of different things going on. You have some very high incomes in Iowa City. You also have some very low incomes. Some of the low incomes are, no kidding, yeah, it's poverty. But many of that is also driven by students as well as seniors that tend not to show a lot of income, but they have a lot in assets. And so a little bit of grain of salt in there, but what it shows is we have a very diverse and complex population that has a lot of diverse and complex needs. And so this comprehensive plan really needs to look at everybody. Educational attainment. This one maybe shouldn't be a surprise either, and I think you're our highest educated city we've ever done a comprehensive plan for, because when we look at of adults, of beyond school age adults, 96, almost 97% have a high school diploma, and then this is the amazing one, almost 61% have some type of advanced degree. That actually makes you stand out quite a bit, so it's a very educated population when we look at any kind of a peer group, outside of a university setting, of course, but that's kind of fun. When we look at your housing diversity, and this is going to be, if I jump ahead and kind of guess the future of this comprehensive plan, housing is going to be a major topic, maybe even the number one topic. How we live, the changing household structures we have, and frankly, the housing needs at many different levels. And so right now, Iowa City is more diverse than many communities as far as housing types. And so we have them broken down in kind of three big categories. Single-family detached, think of that, your traditional single-family home. There's older ones and newer ones and everything in between. Whereas that single-family attached, sometimes we'll call that the missing middle. That's duplex, row house, townhome, very low density apartment, 4, 5, 6 unit buildings. And then that multifamily residential, we might more typically consider that apartments and condominiums. And so when we look at those percentages, often we'll find communities have a very low percentage of that middle one, that single family attached, and then they have much more single family than they do multifamily. In this case, you're a little more balanced. However, based on, and you're doing a big regional housing study as we speak, based on some of our initial analysis, this will be something to talk about, that maybe this isn't quite pushing enough on some of those attached and multifamily product that we do need to serve that growing population as well as your existing residents that are struggling with housing. And then when we look at that future market demand, and so we talk about, we know we have a housing need today, and this is without even stacking on top of that housing need, just based on that, say, 20,000 population growth in the next 25 years, we can do some estimates of how many new residents per year, so about 773, and then how many households is that? Well, that's, if we kind of do that median household size, 347. Well, when we use also a vacancy rate, because you can't have 100% occupancy, there's no flexibility in the marketplace for people moving, buying, and selling and relocating. We have to have a little vacancy, so about 364 new housing units would be needed per year. And if you think about that, that's about a new unit a day. Now that's on average. Some years you build more than other years. You'll have a big project come in, and a couple of years may go before you have another one. But you can see that's steady, consistent demand. And that's to meet just the growing need. We still haven't even addressed maybe there's an existing pressing need. And then what we don't know is, are we going to grow a little slower or a little bit faster? So I think housing is a very, very important topic for us. I want to talk a little bit about employment. Some interesting stats, and again, probably no surprise, is that healthcare and social assistance at your number one employer, followed very closely with those. Our educational services is actually a little bit bigger right now, and then retail, trade, food service, manufacturing. So all of your biggest employment sectors. The interesting one, and I was very surprised by that, is that healthcare and social assistance is so volatile, because you can see from that chart kind of that up and down action as you lose jobs, gain jobs, lose jobs, gain jobs. Interestingly enough, since 2002, you've been seeing about 327 new jobs a year, which is kind of in line with that population growth if you realize that not everybody is coming in for employment. There may be retirees, people that are actually coming out of the workforce, or sometimes you'll have a spouse that works at home and is not a part of the workforce, or the young kids. And so interestingly enough, that you've had that healthy job growth with that, which is another indication we see no reason why you're not going to continue to grow. Sorry, go ahead and jump to the next one. The other very interesting thing, which this is a good indicator right now too, is the estimated number of jobs within the city of 56,000. It's always generally lower than your population, so that's normal, because you have people that are either too young to work or not working for multiple reasons, or retirees. But when we look at this little diagram, you have about 38,000 roughly, and these are a little bit old numbers. It's the latest available data, 2022 data, about 38,000 people coming in every day to work. Substantial. You're an employment center. About almost 18,000 people live and work here, do not leave here for work. They work within town. And then about 14,000 leave for work. Often in communities, we'll see a lot of migration out for employment. And so you are a employment center. And we look at those 38,000 folks that are coming into town as potential future residents, which is another thing on housing. If you had the place for these folks to live, if you had the community they want to live in here, would they relocate? What we know is the more of these internal capture, if you will, people that live and work within their same community, it's better on many, many fronts. We're not spending time nor energy for transportation for work. People tend to shop local, and that includes when you're at, on lunch or coming home from work or to work. So you have more buying power within town. And then there's a quality of life. You're spending less time in transportation to the office or to your job or to whatever place you're working. And so we like to try to grow that pie in the middle. You already have a good starting point, and sometimes as a job center it's hard to, but we'd love to see that grow. All right. Any questions on that data before I jump onto the last little spot here? Please.
Krylov asking about whether you track the pay. Like, are these low-paying jobs? What is the trend? Are they higher? Are they moving higher? Are they moving lower?
Yeah,
And just where the new population is coming from and how that's going to change the profile that you have in the beginning,
Right.
politically and in other ways, and what the values are, what's important. So the question, I'm not asking you whether the answer, I'm just asking whether this is something that you're analyzing.
So some of that data may or may not exist, and I'm going to take a few notes here on those questions. We're a victim of whatever data is available, and so some things are available, some things are not. We might be able to find a little bit about what the new job growth specifically is in. Sometimes we might be able to find even the pay rates. It's a little bit harder to figure out where folks are generally moving from. It just kind of depends on what data sets are available for a certain community. We're using a few different sources. In fact, if you ever see any of our slides, we're normally literally citing and sourcing what that data is from. So a lot of it is from the federal government, it's from the Census Bureau, because they have access to the payroll data, if you will. But we can look.
Thanks.
Yeah, please.
Early on, you had the words nature and environment. Do you have a way of tracking the living organisms of our community that are not human and that we understand are part of the ecosystem even though we're in an urban environment, such as birds, such as the ground squirrels and the trees in which they live? I live up Newton Road along in that area with a lot of big trees have been taken down. Do we have in the plan not only to replace a tree somewhere, but perhaps when we take down these old trees, really, we should do more than plant one tree because it will take years to replace a large tree that has delivered into our environment the kind of benefits that we want to continue. The cities has a leaf litter urging, as you well know, for keeping alive during the winter the insect populations as larvae and other creatures that live in the leaves. So I just would urge that we consider the non-human populations of which we are a part in a living environment.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. And I definitely will have a spot here at the end for some comments like that, things to consider in the comp plan. But to your question, I've known no data source that says this is what our natural population is. But that'd be interesting.
But we have lots of bird watchers that might be enlisted to try to keep track of how many birds are seeing. Or we might also be checking under some of the glass window structures to see if there are dead birds accumulating, because that's often a problem that goes unnoticed in cities.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Please.
So this is Grim. This is more of a clarification thing. I'm sorry I was late. You may have already answered it. Obviously, North Liberty and Coralville would sway into this and what's happening within those cities. I'm assuming there's a factor in your predictions for the future of how that might impact things, or is any of that taken into consideration?
So yes and no. That's a hard one to answer directly. So this plan is only for Iowa City and what we anticipate the planning boundary, so it doesn't get into a neighboring jurisdiction. However, when we do look at housing and population, certain aspects of it are done at a regional level. And so frankly, some of the volatility on how fast Iowa City may grow is frankly housing availability in a Tiffin or a North Liberty. Anecdotally, I believe they are benefiting from some of the employment and economic engine of Iowa City, and it's cheaper and easier probably to build there. And so you're seeing a lot of housing, especially Tiffin in particular, because I drive by it and watch its very rapid growth. And so some of that population growth is occurring there that might have occurred here. But it's a hard one to kind of quantify specifically, but I appreciate the question.
Yeah. So it's fair to say, like, the data that we're looking at is just pulling off of strictly the history of Iowa City and projecting forward. It's not taking necessarily like details from those others.
Yes, the economic analysis is much more regional, and you are benefited by a regional housing study that then does look at all these neighboring communities, and so that'll be factored into the final document. So the short answer is yes, but some of these preliminary the data points we're sharing with you are more Iowa City focused. Sure. What we could talk about is percent capture of population growth or percent capture of development, and that can be a real hard one to perfectly quantify. You were more or less taking an educated guess.
That makes sense.
Yeah, great questions.
I have one more.
Yeah, please.
In regard to housing, you were talking about the growth that's foreseen and the number of new housing units that we might need coming up. Do you have the data for what our current new housing units per year is?
Not on me, but yeah, we do have that data. Yeah. In fact, the city publishes a building permit history, I believe. Annually? You do somewhere. The building permit data is available. In fact, a lot of that, you only have a decennial census, every 10 years, right? The term decennial. A lot of how the Census Bureau actually estimates your current population is based on the city's building permit activity. Every time a building permit is issued, or periodically when building permits are issued, the Census Bureau does actually collect that data.
Chris, can I add something?
Oh, yeah, please.
Hi, Ann Russett, Senior Planner. I just wanted to let the Commission know that we recently published a 2024 residential development analysis that looked at building permit activity, subdivision activity in the city for the year 2024. I can share that with Sarah. It's on our website now under the Planning and Zoning Commission's page, but I can get that to you, and it provides, I think, probably some of the answers to the questions you might have.
Okay, thanks. I was just curious what the difference might be if we knew that now.
Yeah, and before you sit down, would it be fair to say that we do not currently have 360 housing starts in last year?
I don't remember exactly what the numbers were, but it's a pretty grim picture. We really have not rebounded since COVID, and the numbers have been very low. And yeah, I wish I had the report with me, but we're definitely at a deficit at right now if we continue to grow in terms of housing as we did in 2024.
Okay. All right. There's some emerging trends that I want to kind of share with you. As a professional society of planners, we tend to produce a new emerging trends list about every year. And so this is a compilation of a little bit of the major ones from the last couple of times out from the American Planning Association. So I don't want to take full credit for this, but it's something that as planners, as we're doing a new comprehensive plan or a comprehensive plan update, we look at. I wanted to share those with you, and then I have a couple of follow-up questions for you. And so we'll just jump to the first one here on the next slide. So that climate resiliency and conservation, so probably near and dear to many of your hearts, it's how we plan to deal with flooding, natural disasters, and then just as importantly, as we discussed a little bit ago, that preservation of natural features and important environmental considerations, and then that resiliency too when we're having storms, flooding, things like that. And then on the next one, new technology, those emerging trends. We don't even know the full impacts of, say, AI, especially even into the workplace. But all those different technology things, smart cities, where cities can be more interconnected with their infrastructure, everything to try to save money and increase quality of service and protect and preserve things. And then infrastructure and transportation. We know this one's going to continue to evolve and change. And this is from the transportation side, all the many, many ways we get around. So it's not just car, it's biking, walking, transit, and other things maybe we don't even have on the mindset yet, as well as our infrastructure. One of the most important and biggest costs of any city, second to probably police and fire service, is our infrastructure maintenance and expansion. And then housing, and I already said, I think housing is going to be one of our #1 topics, but we are in a housing crunch, and I'd say it's fair to say that is a national problem. That is not a local problem. That is a national thing, but we tend to be working on it at a local level, and it's affordability. Costs continue to go up, and they're going to keep going up. It's expensive. It's time-consuming, it consumes land and resources. And so all those different ways we house people. And then those economic and retail shifts, I've said this too many times, but through COVID, we experienced 10 years of change to the retail market, to retail economy in just 6 months of COVID. It was a pretty fundamental shift in how people shop and how we act. Now, we are not... way back when I was a young planner, we literally used to plan for your next mall. Not in your city in particular, but other growing cities. At a certain population point, we knew there'd be the next mall. Those don't happen anymore. I think if memory serves, the last mall built in North America was in West Des Moines, so Iowa can have some fame for that. But we need to rethink how we plan for retail. Already in meeting with your residents, there's a demand to kind of go back to the old ways when we had more local neighborhood walk-up service type retail in closer proximity, public gathering spaces. And then the future of work. One of you should have asked me, Chris, how does people working from home change those demands of those calculations of who's traveling for work or not, who's coming into your city or still working from home? That data is still lagging. So we're not sure exactly the true impact. There's been a little bit of people headed back to the office, but I think we're at a new frontier where we know people can work remotely, depending on the job type, and successfully. We can do co-working operations. There's some efficiency in not being a perfect bricks and mortar business. So there's a lot of changing things we don't even understand yet. And then the last one I want to leave with you is this thought of inclusive design. So you all know that right now when we're building any kind of a public building, public space, we have to meet the minimum basic accessibility design standards, ADA standards for access. Typically, we're always thinking wheelchair. But the next kind of level to think of that is universal design or open access for everybody at all abilities, whether maybe by age, they're a little less able to navigate a ramp, or they have a little less of a vision acuity, and they need a little bit of more contrast on the ground surface to be able to safely navigate. Some people are more sensitive to light. Some people are more sensitive to sound. Even, how doorknobs are designed or how things are lettered and labeled. And so all those things come into being inclusive in design so that people don't have a separate facility or separate access to be able to enjoy the same public spaces or facilities that everyone does. And so I think that is something you as your Parks Department in particular has really done a lot of heartfelt thought on. And this is one I think might be a really great one for Iowa City to continue with what it's been doing. So with that, I'm kind of curious, as much time as you're going to give me to answer these questions, What's not on this list that's of concern and issue to you? And this can be related to your work on the commission, but it could also be personally some issue, because we all wear many different hats. We all have many different things going on in our lives. So just yell them up. Please.
Climate refugees.
Climate refugees.
The reason I'm asking that in that particular way is because I saw a study done by a journalist and his partner from CBS some years ago. It's about adapting to climate change, and they said the bottom line was get away from the coast and to be at the 42nd parallel or above.
Right.
Well, I looked up where we are. We're the 42nd parallel. So in terms of people moving up and on that basis, that's different from, that's a little bit of a different issue, and also the vulnerability of buildings to bigger storms. We just had the derecho a few years ago.
Right.
So to just build the way everything has always been built, I know I started, my ears started going up when I started hearing concrete and steel versus Tyvek. So climate, weather, refugees, and I don't mean from overseas.
Right. And this is one we're having trouble quantifying. We're not sure,
Right.
but it's been something on mind, just like you said, climate refugees, that having to flee the coasts or fleeing areas of the United States that are arid, that do not have water. So think, what are we blessed here? You know, we do have open land. We do have water right now. You know, we're basically seismically zero. You know, we don't have, but we have storms. And so I also appreciate that. I never had heard of a thing called a derecho. I never thought I'd see a city that lost its tree cover, tree canopy. Yeah, is that a thing we have to really be now prepared for? What happens if that happened more directly here? Obviously, Cedar Rapids was really hit hard. Yeah, we used to think ice storms, but ice storms didn't take down all the trees. Yeah, is now our new thing, windstorms, you know, inland hurricanes. Yeah. Anything else come to mind?
The
Robert?
phrase land use is actually a human view of land that's occupied by all other kinds of life. And we share with it, and we live and derive benefits from it. So I would suggest that there should be some creative thought about how to describe the land other than simply an it, which is there for our use.
Yeah.
I'm a retired ethics teacher, environmental ethics, and this is absent in our culture almost everywhere.
Yeah. And fair to say in Iowa, because we have, I don't know if there's another state where we've changed our environment so dramatically. It's almost every inch has been either farmed, or if it's not farmed, it's probably been, now it's being developed.
And we, you know, it's in our best interest for farming to kill all the insects, but that means the birds will no longer be with us. I mean, it's an ecosystem that's not sustainable, to be very honest, all around us. And our water pollution is not sustainable, and it's getting worse. Our cancer levels are high. That's partly because we ignore what the life was here once, and we're not always looking at our impact upon it.
Right. Any other emerging issues, trends, or things that are kind of on your mind that you're hoping we're looking at with this new comp plan?
Yeah, one I was going to mention is kind of a combination of your technology and infrastructure, but to make it more specific is electrification, I think. Thinking specifically about the grid and the sort of built environment, right, and how those two things interact.
Yeah.
You sort of have to bring both of those, like the big scale and the small scale together to make that goal work.
Yeah. And even that, the thought of like local generation, so more
Yeah,
rooftop
absolutely.
solar.
And storage, yeah.
And storage, yep, battery storage. Yeah, absolutely.
This is Gade. I have just one thought, and I mean, it's hard. I feel like in the time we're at right now, there are a lot of changes, and doing a comprehensive plan when you're visioning the future, when, you know, potentially things have changed, and we're just trying to keep things as they are and keep them funded. How are you incorporating potentially those changes into the plan, and even changes potentially in legislation with like tax code?
Yeah.
And you don't have to answer. I'm just thinking about that.
That is kind of in our forefront of thought, because we do struggle with that. You know, I don't want to call it a reprieve, but frankly, cities have a reprieve until the legislators are back in session, and we'll see what they do with TIF legislation and property taxation. Nobody likes to pay taxes, but we do need methods to pay for things. And so as that toolbox changes for cities, we, in fact, especially last year, we were much more trying to outguess this. But this is where we frankly have to keep the comprehensive plan as a living document so it can react. Because what we may do is next year get to a point where we're ready to adopt, or it is even adopted, and then there's a big change. And we're like, okay, so how do we shift? And that's where we need to build in that flexibility. It's always easier to react to change when you at least have a plan to evaluate. So if we already have a plan, this is our thought process, this is our priorities. So now when you've got this outside influence, how do we react to it? And how do we prioritize what changes are made? And so that's our goal, is that we're still giving kind of a flexible, usable document that's a good tool to then wrestle with these, we don't know what's going to happen. So, yeah.
Yeah, I had some questions, thoughts on natural areas. I think historically, putting in native species or protecting forests was kind of like a reactive thing, right? So we're playing catch up in a lot of ways. So I wish cities took it as a more of a forward-thinking kind of thing of what that vision is, and you have to have some sort of guardrails to try to achieve some sort of goal of what that final picture looks like. But I think in society we have to move away from being reactive on that and be more proactive in that design process.
Yeah, that is a great way to put that. Yeah, thank you. All right, I want to jump to the next one, and this one's even tougher. Knowing we can't do everything, we're going to give a pretty big laundry list to your city council, and we try to boil it down to some top priorities. Now, granted, this is a long-range plan, so we can think big, we can dream big, and at this point, we sure don't want to hold back anything. But if I were to prioritize, what are those top things that you think any comprehensive plan or our comprehensive plan should be addressing, especially the things you even have just brought up today?
This is Gade. I'll just say housing and affordable housing specifically.
Yeah,
So I think you got that right in thinking it'd be a top priority.
right.
I think I was going to say, from a climate perspective, I mean, it has to be net zero, right? I mean, otherwise, like, that's what climate change comes down to, right?
Yeah.
And maybe even draw down beyond that, but that's really dreaming big.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that's currently your goal, right, as the commission, is net zero?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Do you have a time, like by X date? I should have looked all this up.
2050, I think,
Is it
right?
2050?
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
Perfect timing, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for adding.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Along with the housing
Great goal, yes.
is, I just think it's really important to accuratize the predictions in population,
Yeah.
to work on that really, really hard, because there's so much going on with that population collapse, aging, schools closing, universities losing students. It's so up in the air, but there has to be a lot of incentive for stakeholders such as developers to be pushing the prediction up, because the pressure there is profits now. So to really balance those things, so I would say accuratizing and really looking at where the information is coming from and on what basis.
Yeah.
That would be my concern, because the pressures are immense.
Yeah.
And for building, there's so much money involved.
Yeah.
So just picking the middle and staying there, I would say.
Yeah. If I could accurately, like, promise you a certain path, I'd be playing the
Yeah.
lottery or doing some other things too. So it is hard. And I
know.
think if anybody tells you, oh, we got this down perfectly,
Yeah,
we can only look at the past trends and then try to outguess the future trends to try to come up with that best estimate or guess. Now, if it makes you feel any better, the development community is not assisting us with this. So
good.
these are federal government data sources, some that we have to pay for, some that are readily available to anyone.
I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah. And we do not, how we calculate things, it's very transparent. The background data, the data sources, as well as literally the calculation spreadsheets are all provided to the city. The term is black box. We don't black box anything.
Good.
So at the end of the day, we want somebody to be able to replicate anything we come up with.
Excellent.
It's very useful also, like, say, in 10 years, because that's one of the more powerful things. If you did projections 10 years ago and you do them today, or every couple of years you do them, you can start to adjust your calibrations a little.
That's good.
Okay. Any other priorities?
I would say resilience as a whole, because resilience, I mean, it's tangled into survival and it's tangled into climate action, but it's also in resilience of withstanding change within governments and elected officials and things of that nature. So, yeah, resilience as a whole.
I love the term resilience as a term because it can be financial, it can be environmental, it can be, it's how do we keep our community healthy, vibrant, safe for all, welcoming for all, whilst we're experiencing some dramatic change. And I think there's no way around it. We're seeing a lot of change right now. So I think that's a really great way to put it. Yeah.
This is Anderson, just kind of thinking out loud. Just like, how do we bake in sustainability too, into kind of everything about being a city, living in a city, building in a city. Construction of some sort is going to happen. What ways can we, as like a downtown, as a city, like interconnect our communities in a way that isn't further destructive to the natural environment, while protecting green spaces, that sort of thing. It's just kind of putting like just a sustainable spin on the whole shebang, I guess, if that makes sense.
It sure does. There's been some other communities that have taken also, and I think I can say this with you, is that you take it very seriously and it's a big priority to your community, and that throughout the entire plan that we're weaving that line of sustainability throughout it. And I think that's a very fair comment. Even as we look at your more near-term development pattern, you are not doing a lot of the land annexation and kind of, greenfield development. You're doing a lot of infill and a lot of more densification in your downtown. In fact, a lot of your more recent development projects have been within existing built areas. And so we often look at that as being a pretty sustainable approach to growth and development. It's existing infrastructure. It's already not a natural space. It's already concreted over, and so why not? And so that's, I think, a very healthy thing. And I think going forward, we can look at some tools to actually identify within the plan. Sometimes we even use fun icons to say, here's that sustainability thread through each one of our chapters or components. Yeah. Okay. Last one, just to make sure I don't miss anything. So how can we, through this comprehensive planning effort, because we don't want to operate in a vacuum, support the good work of this commission? Is there anything you think that we can do as far as participation, involvement? We're not reinventing your work or your planning. but we can sure reference and have it help weave a thread through our plan.
Yeah.
Please.
Well, we can only manage what we measure. And if we don't measure the loss of the natural life around us, then it just disappears. So we have to find a way to measure our impact. From nature's perspective, we're a deadly species, and we should recognize it and learn from nature.
Have you all looked at the climate action plans that we've made over the years?
Only the most recent,
Or, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and,
fine, yeah,
and not in great depth just yet.
sure.
And so that's why I was kind of curious to kind of meet with you and see where your priorities lie. But yeah, that's one of the many documents that'll help influence some of the recommendations that ultimately come from here.
Yeah,
Because
that's what
that's
I was-
work you've already done. We love to go in where, in fact, you as a community have a great history of long-range planning and planning. And so everyone, even your past comprehensive plan, some of your other planning documents definitely come to play in this. So we try not to reinvent the wheel.
Sure.
Please.
Me again, Krylov. Being proactive about the kinds of businesses that would be good for Iowa City.
Okay.
And by that I mean is looking for balance between climate-friendly strategies and economics. So, for example, AI is a powerful technology, but it's brutal on the climate.
Yeah.
So even think in terms of identifying industries that would be, go after them, look at what their needs are in terms of the populace and things
Right.
like that, and take up the space with long-term with benign industries. So something like that, something on the order of balancing economics, combining economics with the philosophy of the city proactively.
Yeah, and you bring up a great example how technology is impacting us. We had the surge of data centers, obviously with our tech boom. And what we experience here in Iowa, a little more so in central Iowa and western Iowa, is we are well suited for data centers. We have relatively affordable electricity and plentiful electricity, and as well as those that tend to use water for cooling or more water for cooling, we have water. So we've seen the great proliferation of data centers. I've been on a few of those projects too. And you're right, AI, because of its computing demands, has even a higher power demand. So now we're going to just build another generation of data centers. And so some communities say, yes, we love the tax dollars for the relatively, low impact on certain infrastructure. But on the other side, it's taking power, taking water.
Well,
is that
pollution
what
like
we want?
Memphis right now.
Oh, go for it. Tell me what's going on in Memphis?
Well, they're trying to get Musk out of Memphis. He's polluting the water. It's a huge thing right now.
Gotcha.
So I'm just saying, there's this.
Yeah, there are businesses like that are some kind of
Yeah.
heavier industry or producing some widget that's toxic, and yeah.
Yeah, it's like
Might not be
raise
something
the
you want
bar
here.
and be proactive. It's not just raise the bar and just don't let people in like this, but look and see what, just like you said, the vision was that this is kind of low damage. I don't know how else to call it.
I think I know what you mean. Yeah.
Low damage, but some planning for something I would call strategic industries, and look at what's a strategic industry other than, so there's agriculture is a strategic industry, but what kind of agriculture?
That's your point. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, it's not feedlots. So, and how do you make it hospitable
Right.
to the kind of agriculture that would be a strategic
Right.
kind?
Especially if we're thinking we want to try to promote local foods, that we're not shipping our food so far, our production so far away from
Right.
our homes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This is Harrelson. You mentioned a lot of folks have talked about walkability and having
Big time.
retail nearby and things like that. And we on the commission have talked a lot about the sort of 15-minute city in the last couple of years.
Right.
I think any lean towards that direction, I think we would really appreciate, or any information about those kinds of how we can, like, as a city, become more sustainable in those ways would be appreciated from me, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard that from just numerous folks, how, and they not know necessarily the term 15-minute city, and it's kind of a shame that has gotten so polarizing, because it was just really talking about having that ability
Right.
to, walk to local retail, or it's a very easy commute to local retail, and it's a public gathering space that you can see your friends and neighbors, and it's, I kind of look at, other communities as kind of a model. So you look at the older neighborhoods of Minneapolis, and they have the hard corners are commercial, four little commercial buildings that support the residential neighborhood around it, and how beloved many of them are. And it's like, I think people keep telling me, on our street right here would be perfect. Okay, got it. And so I think there's some strategies we can talk about on how we look at zoning regulations and design standards and the rules to help support that, like, local business. I think if any city can do it, you guys can. So, anything else?
One thing, and I don't know if this is, part of what you're doing when you're getting public feedback, but using it as an opportunity to inform people about the things that we've already been doing as you're gathering feedback
Yeah.
from them.
Yeah, yep, that's a great comment. I try to, as a matter of practice, let people kind of say their piece, unless they really, really have something that I just, hey, no, the sky is actually blue, it's not, green today, that I just, so they know. But I think through our comprehensive plan itself, to memorialize all the great things that are going on, so that people kind of benefit of knowing we do this, that is going on. Even your positive changes, and frankly, your sustaining of some of your transit services when so many communities are actually cutting their bus service. So I think there's a lot of things the community is doing that should be acknowledged. You have so many great nonprofit volunteer service organizations. It's actually overwhelming for an out of town consultant to try to quantify it. So I think, yeah, we can already tout all the great things that are going on. Okay. I'm worried I'm taking up all your time. Anything else before I just hit my last two slides? Okay, let me go through those. So we do have an engagement website, and I'll show that on my last slide, how you can get to it. But we have things coming up, so you can kind of see the whole laundry list. We're doing a combination of neighborhood listening sessions, workshops, some targeted meetings with some different neighborhood groups. We're doing one-on-one interviews with some community members. Sometimes we call them stakeholders, but it's a pretty broad cross-section. I've been meeting with so many neat people. And then some of the future public workshops coming up. And so we're really taking a lot of time to have either formalized meetings in various locations throughout the community, as well as pop-up events, with the goal that, one, hopefully everybody knows this is going on. Two, if they want to participate, they tell us what they think, and that they have a lot of different options to do it, because we all communicate differently. We all have different ways we like to be approached. But on the last slide here, I do want to kind of promote our project website. This is the best one-stop shop to send somebody. So you can scan that QR code. You can always link to it via the city's website. But it's a great spot to send people to know what's going on, what's our next steps. A lot of our existing presentations we've made to, say, our steering committee and to others are posted online. And then going forward, as we start producing some drafts for consideration, some strategic initiatives, that information will also be on here. This does have different surveys. So there's a mapping survey where you can identify different comments throughout the entire city. You can see how other people have been commenting, as well as some more traditional survey formats. And then for those lucky enough to be randomly selected, we do have a statistically valid community-wide survey being conducted by a professional survey company. But because it is a statistically valid randomized survey, that is going out to I guess in essence, they're randomly identifying individual properties and following up with those residents. And so if you got a letter from ETC, will be getting a letter from ETC in the future, congratulations, that's really rare. Fill it out, turn it right in. And if you're not, sorry, but to keep it statistically valid, it does have to be randomized. However, there's so many other ways to kind of give us that exact same feedback. And do not hesitate to reach out to us. So without any further comments or questions for me, I'll be quiet and go away so you can continue with your meeting.
I have one question, if I may, Chris.
Yeah, please.
Often after these meetings, we'll get some follow-up thoughts emailed to me. If that happens, can I pass them on to you?
Please do. Absolutely. Especially questions or future things that might even give me time to look up the answer and try to send them back.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
All right.
Really well done.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
I enjoy this. Okay, thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, that brings us to air quality sampling report.
Yes, so those of you who were on the commission last year may recall that we received some letters from residents who were concerned about odors in their neighborhood. And at the time, the commission expressed sympathy to the residents, but also recognized that you're not an environmental quality commission. But because of that sympathy and interest in the topic, we wanted to circle back with an update as to what has happened since then. Purely for the efforts of transparency and just knowledge sharing. And I want to make it very clear, hopefully it was clear in the memo that came with it, that the commission is not being asked to act on this information anyway or make a decision. It's just we're sharing so that you know what happened. Essentially, after those concerns were brought forward to the commission and the city council as well, the city engaged in conversations with the Department of Natural Resources, who then engaged the Environmental Protection Agency, who sent testing equipment down to Iowa City to drive around in the neighborhoods. And if you read the report that came in the packet, you saw that they didn't just do the industrial and commercial areas, they went into neighborhoods as well. They came on different days and different times in order to try to get as much information as possible. They used sensors to help them kind of zero in on where some of these scents might be coming from. They did not convey the dates and times that they would be doing this work to city staff. And part of the reason they did that, as mentioned in the memo, is to maintain integrity in the process. And also, so that city staff couldn't, not that we would, but also to prevent against, alerting businesses like, hey, they're going to be testing today, maybe tamp down what you're doing. It was a true blind sample to see what was happening. As you read in the memo in the report, there was a detectable level of toluene. I have practiced and practiced pronouncing it correctly. Almost got there. The thing that we want to be very clear on is that the level, although the EPA did follow up with the facility that was determined to be emitting that, it was at levels that were 100 times lower than would impact human health. And they did then follow up with an unannounced site visit just to see what the processes were, to do documents review, to talk with the leadership of that facility, and everything was determined to be within full compliance. So there's really no follow-up effort necessarily that the EPA will do at this point, but they did provide the information in hopes, I think, that maybe it will allay some fears that we may be having some air quality issues that in fact we do not. And of course, it's very understandable. For me, it was interesting to read it. As you may recall, the concerns that were raised were about an acetone smell. And it turns out toluene smells very similarly to acetone. It's also a very light molecule that disperses very easily in the air, so it makes sense that on occasion residents would smell it. But brass tacks, and this is not in the memo, but in digesting this information, at the end of the day, if you are pumping gasoline into your car on a hot day, you are inhaling higher concentrations of worse chemicals than were detected from this facility. So that being said, we do also have our city manager here who has been in conversation with the EPA throughout this process. If you have any questions about the findings or we'll just start there. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them to the degree that we can, recognizing no one in this room is an expert, but we're all doing the best we can with the information.
One question, is the level, has the level been compared to European standards?
Not to my knowledge, no.
That would be interesting.
I can try to find out what that might be.
Sometimes there's a big difference, and it really all depends on, different pressures.
I did see that they highlighted a CDC report of toluene and the health impacts of it, and that also highlighted the level of those health impacts too that the CDC found. And I feel pretty confident in that source, that the level is accurate.
Good.
Yep.
But still one.
I'm not an air quality expert, but I did look at their source, and I did feel confident in that.
Good.
I think it's great, great job on the city following through and working with the EPA on this.
It's a great report.
Yeah.
I'm not questioning it. It's just, I was curious, as someone who grew up in Europe and keeps up with the news. Curious.
I can't make promises, but Nadia, I'm happy to look it up and see what I can find.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right.
All righty, well, we'll go to item 6, old business, continued review of the Accelerating Iowa Cities Climate Actions Plan, action item relating to buildings and discussion of prioritization scoring.
We have 2 sections left, and I am excited. I think we can get through it. So where we left off, we were just getting ready to start the city policy action items. There are 2 action items here. They're both interrelated. One is to advocate for state adoption of advanced energy codes, and the other is to advocate for aggressive energy code development and adoption. Basically, I had to step back myself and think about how do these things differ from one another. One's really about what are we advocating for at the state level, and the other is...
Can you repeat where we are?
Oh, yes. We're at BCP 1. So
BCP1, the bottom.
This is where I wish I had put
here
page
we are.
numbers on them.
Okay, thanks.
Right. They're both interrelated. The first one has to do with what are we advocating for at the state level. The second one has to do with what are we adopting at the local level. in many ways, they go hand in hand because traditionally, what a state adopts is considered the floor of what can, no one can go below that standard. But in a state like Iowa, which is known as a home rule state, which is a planning term we won't go into, basically it means that generally then cities are free to adopt higher standards. And although that technically remains true in the state of Iowa, what we've seen in recent years is that when we adopt higher standards, it gets preempted. This happened with our building code, which is a little different from the energy code, but when the city adopted a building code that was of a higher standard, and usually those standards are packaged in years. So each year, the building professions come up with a recommended code, and right now, I think we're on the 2017 code, as I recall. So one of the things we've been advocating is that the state adopt the 2020 code or the 2021 code. Even though we have the ability technically to adopt a higher standard, when that's happened, it's been preempted. So the city has been historically reluctant, at least in the 5 years I've been here, to adopt a higher energy code ourselves. That being said, you'll see in the efforts that we've made that it does get included in our legislative priorities every year. And as you may recall from a previous discussion, in recognition that it may not be strategically wise to adopt a higher standard for BCP2 ourselves, what we have been doing is pivoting to focus on incentives. And I just have to tell you, this is something I couldn't have said before today, but man, I got back from vacation today, and I think I processed it must have been 6 or 7 new HERS incentive grants. Like, they are just really rolling in. So on that level, the incentives do seem to be working fairly well, or the Home Building Association and its builders are really embracing them, which is great.
That's great.
So here too, if you recall our rating system, as you're marking it down, a 1 would be to make it a low priority, something that we just monitor. A 2 would be something we'd maintain efforts. So in this case, maintaining it would be continuing to advocate, included in our legislative priorities that we send up to the city council and then on to our lobbyists at the State House. And a level 5 would be to do something over and beyond what we're doing right now. I don't know what that looks like, but if you set it as a super high priority, we will do our very best to figure it out. And then shall we move on to public projects next? So BPP1. This one is to pursue a solar or battery storage partnership with MidAmerican. It really should be and/or. As you may recall, Iowa City was in conversation in the run-up to 2020 about installing a 5-acre solar array on the edge of our Waterworks Park. That was voted down in the early days of the pandemic. Wim, correct me if I'm wrong, but the design for that, or not the design, the capacity for that solar then went to another community?
It was installed in Hills, so
Yeah.
it still serves the grid, but yeah, it's down in
Yeah.
Hills.
It still serves the grid, it's just not in Iowa City. In subsequent discussions with the commission, there is continued interest in having a solar array somewhere in Iowa City and trying to pursue that partnership again. I do diligently, once a year, at least, tap on the shoulder of MidAmerican and say, hey, interested in coming back to the table? And they've had other priorities in the meantime, but if this is something we would like to ramp up, if we feel very strongly that we want to see this kind of initiative in Iowa City, I would say rank it as a 5, and we will be a little more muscular in those conversations.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
Krylov. Are there any quantitative, any information about the benefits of this? How much, who would benefit and how much? from this kind of a partnership with Mid-America? I mean, there's got to be a reason why Mid-America is not doing it. Just, what is the benefit? Who benefits?
This is a tricky question to answer, but I think the question under your question is, why is Mid-America not interested in pivoting and doing it somewhere else in the community? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
it's-
I, of course, can't speak for Mid-American, and I don't want to put WIM entirely on the hot seat to do so. But I would say the reluctance has been in part that they invested quite a lot over the course of 2 years in doing engineering studies to try to find the best possible location to do so, and participated in good faith to be voted down the first time it came before City Council. And I think the reluctance has been that they may experience similar pushback from community members were we to try to pursue another project. In addition, one of the things you'll notice in the history here is that after that happened, the Johnson Clean Energy District approached the city about doing a study to map out alternate locations where we might install a solar array. And for a variety of reasons, to no surprise, the one location that Mid-American had identified turned out to be ideal. There are some folks in the community who felt that perhaps it was ideal because it was by the interstate and so it looked flashy. But in fact, what made it ideal was its proximity to a substation that would allow us to put that energy easily on the grid at the lowest cost. Other locations, we would have to invest significantly more, and by we, I mean Mid-American would have to invest significantly more in the infrastructure to accommodate it.
So then what would have to happen to make this happen?
Well, I think we would.
So for example, if I put 5, what would happen if we all put 5?
Well, if you all put 5, what we could do is go back to Mid-American and say there continues to be very strong interest. This is a real priority for the commission. From your perspective, what are the next steps that you would need from us in order to revive this conversation? And, we can't promise that it would happen, but certainly we would be happy to take it up. I would say, short of that, I don't know that we're going to make progress unless the commission and the community sends a very clear signal that this is something they want to pursue.
Just so I understand, is the idea just to get solar energy on the grid, like writ large for the entire state? Or is there a disaster, grid goes down or something, and then the array kicks in for Iowa City? Or, I guess I'm trying to...
I think it's more dedicating the former, using some of Iowa City's land to contribute to clean energy on the grid.
And it would just kind of, tick the dial further into the green, just statewide in general, just with and we would be contributing to that as a community.
Yeah, we would be contributing to the growth of solar. I will say, and this may be worth noting, this item refers to pursuing a partnership with Mid-American Energy. Just as a reminder, we are served by 2 utilities. The other is Eastern Iowa Light and Power, and we have had some preliminary discussions with them about developing a solar array down by our wastewater treatment plant. One of the other things that made the solar array at the water treatment plant ideal was that water treatment, both coming into the system to make it drinkable and then cleaning it up to put it back in the river, is our highest use of electricity as a city. And so if we can locate clean energy near there, we're helping clean up our most significant energy use as a municipality. Just to put it in some context, 6 out of every $10 the city spends on electricity is spent related to water.
So then can we stipulate that solar or battery partnership with either Mid-America Energy or Eastern Iowa?
Yes, I would
And-
say that's an option.
Also stipulate water treatment plant?
Sure. Yeah, if you want to pencil that in the notes
Yeah.
next to your score,
Okay.
we can compile that. That would be useful. And there are other ways we can think about it too. We could be talking about microgrid partnerships.
That was already in my note.
Which is solar paired with a battery. And that one is a resilience measure with the idea that, should there be a disruption in the grid, something like a hospital that's put on a microgrid can continue to function. All right, BPP2 is pursuing a net zero public housing initiative. As we've previously discussed, net zero is most easily achieved from new construction rather than trying to retrofit. There are some things we've done, you'll see, that have been working with community partners like the Housing Trust to try to develop, I would say, to move toward net zero public housing, but we haven't gotten fully there. I think on this one, if you were to designate it as a 1, of course, that's throttling back a little, monitoring, just sort of keeping our eyes out, looking for those opportunities. A 3 would be something like continuing those conversations with community partners who may be able to work with us on this, or setting aside, and I would say a 5 then would be setting aside climate dollars specifically to help achieve net zero construction for public housing that the city itself plans to construct.
Is the city constructing public housing?
We are, actually. In fact, one of the discussions that's been happening in the Housing Authority has been to basically take more full ownership of our public housing. We had, under previous councils, kind of moved away from owning and constructing units ourselves, and that pendulum seems to be swinging in the other direction. One of the ways we've been wading into this, separate from building it ourselves, of course, is the energy efficiency home retrofit that we've offered for landlords willing to accept a housing choice voucher in return. But we could, I would think we would have a better chance of developing net zero housing if we develop it ourselves. That being said, there are models for net zero housing on Habitat for Humanity properties. So if we wanted to continue pursuing partnerships, there seems some viable options potentially there. Actually, they submitted 2 of the invoices for HERS rating today. They had very high scoring, or high performing homes they constructed. It was exciting to see. Are you ready for BPP 3? Great. So BPP 3 is focused on municipal building efficiency and electrification, and I think you all have sat through enough meetings in this room to know this building is not the most efficient building in the city, but we are making strides. We have made significant progress in LED retrofits in our buildings. We're actually, I think, beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel with just a few more that need to be done. We also have quarterly calls set up with Mid-American Energy that we now consult on regularly for all our projects to talk about how can we work together to achieve higher efficiency in buildings, city-owned buildings, that is. And of course, our new construction, we're holding to a very high standard for energy efficiency. In fact, I think we've discussed this previously, the U.S. Green Building Council, which oversees LEED, recently included our Public Works building in their manual as an example of a high-performing building, so that's all very exciting. If you mark this as a 3, we're going to continue these efforts. I think we would continue these efforts regardless because it just makes good fiscal sense to try to increase the efficiency of our buildings. If you mark it a 5, and thinking about ways that we could potentially grow this would be to think about incorporating transportation electrification into these efforts. And in particular, you'll see I noted something about looking at EV parking at parks. Mm-hmm. So looking at how do we get electrification outside of our buildings even and into parking lots.
One comment.
Mm-hmm.
To Bob's mentioning of measurability. Maybe this is in your control to get this really measurable about what the savings are, the economic aspect of it. So I would say municipal building efficiency and electrification and focused on measuring the effects and communicating them, because it's under, you get my drift.
Yeah, you're asking us to track the impacts of embracing the efficiency and talk about it.
Aggregated into something that can be publicized.
Actually, to your point, this is an excellent one to think about that on a little, because one of the things we do is try to do a municipal greenhouse gas inventory. Ideally, we do it every 5 years. We just completed one last year that we're going to be incorporating into a 5-year update on progress made. And I'm a little embarrassed to say, but the city's done pretty well about lowering emissions, but city operations, not so much. We've actually been growing in our emissions profile. So getting a handle on efficiency is a key strategy, I think, for addressing that, and is something that we can report on.
Are we still going to choose something to try to write an objective that we learned about from Jane?
Yes.
This might be a good candidate for that, maybe?
Yep.
I don't know if y'all remember that, where we write out the metric and a specific measurable goal and all of that.
Yeah. I was going to mention this at the end of our discussion, but now's as good a time as any to say, once we complete this today, we'll be compiling these scores. We are not going to have a meeting in July, as you may recall. We decided to take a break then because it's hard to get quorum when everybody's off traveling, which is fantastic, and I hope you will. But when you come back, then in August, we'll be presenting you with the scores, and we'll be tweaking them just a little to make sure we've got consensus on what we think really are the top priorities, the medium priorities, and the lower priorities. And then from that, we'll take a look at those top priority items and see if we can't pick one or two to attach a measure to, following the process that Jane outlined for us. And we'll have that worksheet so you don't have to remember exactly how it was done.
Can we finish the last one before 5:30?
Yeah, I think we can. BPP4 advocates for state legislative changes to enable subscription-based community solar. There were 2 bills that went before the legislature this year, one in the House and one in the Senate, both advocating in different ways for community solar. They did not pass in this session. We can continue to keep our eyes on it and include it as one of our legislative priorities. If that remains a priority to the commission. If it's a top priority, I would say, list it as a 5. If you feel it's a medium priority, particularly in light of the discussion we've had about creating a solar project in Iowa City, this is something that very easily could go hand in hand. If the community solar legislation passes, we could potentially, put up something by the wastewater treatment plant that people could subscribe to, which would be nice for renters and folks in mobile homes who otherwise can't, or anyone who can't get solar on their roof, but nonetheless want to invest in it.
Do you mean that it didn't come to a vote, or that it was voted down?
I don't believe it came to a vote. I think it
that's
was
good.
referred to the Commerce Committee, or referred back to Commerce.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. But it didn't make it out of committee initially, which was nice. Cool. That's the last one. We had so much to do today, and we packed it all in. All right, if you will leave your scoring sheets at your site, we will pick them up, and as I said, we'll compile them to bring them back at the next session. If you have any questions, or if you've been filling out yours electronically and you want to email it to me after this meeting, please feel free to do so. Yeah, thanks for all your hard work and all the careful, thoughtful discussion on this. It's been really useful. When we come back in August, we'll take up transportation as well.
Exciting. Great. Thank you so much. All right, no public comment, so we will motion, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Shetty seconds.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
All right, thanks, everyone.